James.
Great. Thank you very much, Ron. Excited to be here and present to all of you today. I got to echo what Ron was talking about. I, too, am ready to get back out on the road. I've done a couple of in-live presentations last month. It was fantastic. It was great to chat with people afterward. This is kind of weird because I'm still talking to a camera, but hopefully you're able to take away some information from it, and hopefully see you all in the future on the road, down the road. So as Ron alluded to, my goal here today is try and scare the pants off you. Well, we'll see. But definitely talking about ransomware. It's something we're all familiar with. We've seen it in the news. So essentially going to go through it with some tips, tricks, some additional information on how to be able to understand and protect your organization with the attack. So my name is James McQuiggan. I am a security awareness advocate at KnowBe4. Prior to being at KnowBe4, I spent 18 years at a little German company called Siemens. Worked in our wind division and gas turbine division in our product group, doing product security, networking, and so forth. Came up over the years doing network security, and got into cybersecurity and got into doing awareness, and I enjoy it so much. Now I'm also a college professor as well. So KnowBe4 is essentially, Ron may have mentioned it, you may have heard of us if you haven't. Basically, we do security awareness and training and phishing assessments. Been around now, just hit our 11th year, and basically just trying to get as many people educated with new school security awareness training. So why is ransomware continue to be so successful, and how can we stop it? That's kind of like the $64 million question. Hopefully be able to provide you some insight to answer that when we get done here today. So one of the things that I have that shows up in my inbox every day is I've got certain keywords that I use Google Alerts for, and things like data breach, data leaks, insider threat, business email compromise. I also have one for ransomware. I even have one for my name as well, so that way if I see anything new pop up, I can check it to make sure that it's really me. But I have one for ransomware, and ransomware pretty well always has the most articles in it that it finds news article wise coming back every day, because ransomware is so active and so many organizations are getting hit with it. This is pretty well, I mean, that's 3 pages, 3 scrolls within my screen, and I got a pretty big monitor of different ransomware articles or events or conferences, but centered around ransomware. So when we look at ransomware, one of the things I want to look at first is coming out of the Verizon data breach report. When we look at how a lot of the data breaches are happening, and I'll get around to why data breaches is like ransomware, but humans are basically classified as the weakest link. And I'll be honest, I hate that term. I think humans can be your strongest asset. The problem is lack the education, lack the awareness, or lack the culture within organizations for them to be able to make those proper security decisions that, whether we're in IT or not, we are going, yeah, no, we know not to fall for a phishing link, and we know how to hover over those links. But so many people out there just don't have that as part of their knowledge, their awareness, their behaviors, and so forth. So Verizon data breach, social engineering, right up there, right behind it is the web application attacks. But when we look at the cost of spending, we know that organizations are spending money. We know that budgets are happening. Now, whether that budget is happening after a data breach or before, that can't tell from this particular chart that I got from the Identity Theft Resource Center, that basically projected showing spending, but also the number of breaches. And they kind of go hand in hand. So when we look at the number of breaches that are happening is because of social engineering to the human, like I can break it down to see where the different spending is. So we got about almost 50% sitting on networking equipment, routers, switches, servers. Great. Sorry, not servers, but routers and switches and firewalls. Then we look at endpoint protection, another 25% about, and then web and identity is about 14%. On the far right-hand part there, it's about 3% being spent on the human. So we're spending all the money on all the technology, but not as much on the human, yet we're seeing all the attacks happening on the social engineering to the human. So either there has to be a shift in that spending, we're either not seeing enough being spent, or either people aren't taking on the awareness or aren't being able to create that culture. I think our first knee-jerk reaction is to go with the widget, go with the technology, try to have technology to fix everything, and it's going to fix a majority of the issues. But now what we're running into is because of social engineering attacks that we're having against organizations. So kind of run down real quick where we are with ransomware right now. Everyone's seeing the news and the different articles. Just to provide maybe some little extra information fodder that you might need for getting, with those budget talks or conversations, some other additional information that might help prevent your ransomware attack. I'm going to talk about ransomware prevention, what's involved with that, more or less from the human side. Talk about recovery. If you unfortunately get hit with ransomware, what do you need to do? And then I'm going to go over some final thoughts and recap at the end. All right. So real quick, not diving too deep into the history of ransomware, but in November of 2019, almost 2 years now, ransomware changed from being more of a nuisance type attack where they would come in, encrypt your data, leave you a note, and then you would have to go pay. Then they started stealing the data because I guess everyone started realizing that the backups were happening. And so they started exfiltrating the data and then extorting the people for that data. Then we get to almost like a triple extortion where now they're going after the employees, or they're going after customers, patients, clients that may be involved with that organization that they were able to attack. So they're stepping up the game pretty well almost every 6 to 8 months that we're seeing evolving, changing. Now they're getting in and they might not even drop ransomware. They're just going to get in, steal the data and hold the data for ransom and not worry about the ransomware. Or if they do hit you with ransomware, then they follow that up with a denial of service attack where they are basically trying to cripple your network, make it harder for you to recover, making it harder to get back up and running, and you end up having to pay. We're even seeing ransomware as a service. And that's what we had with DarkSide, which kind of went away and now it's come back again with a different name. We're seeing these ransomware as a service where they've got the malware and the ransomware and the software and everything you need. You just basically go to them and provide either the access, or you provide email addresses to start the attack, and then off you go. Pretty well, you're getting, there's sometimes a 50-50 split, 70-30. It's just going to depend. Sometimes there's even a flat rate fee that's out there as well. So we looked upon already how the data breaches are happening. This particular one shows for ransomware, and we're seeing it with phishing and RDP. RDP compromise, and with a lot of folks and organizations having to go into a work from home environment last year, people needed access that didn't really already have it. So they ended up setting remote desktop servers connected to the internet. And it's kind of been, phishing and RDP have been kind of sharing that. But over the last year, the ransomware attacks are because of one of these two things. So just to kind of give a sense of a timeline, sometimes we don't know how long it takes. Sometimes the ransomware attack comes and you hadn't even seen anything in any of your SIEMs or any other type of detection software. But basically, here is one particular ransomware group. They were able to get in and out in 17 minutes. Once they got in through an RDP session, basically task manager found the domain controller, dropped the ransomware, left the note, and split. 17 minutes. I mean, you can't even get a cup of coffee in that amount of time. NetWalker, they were doing it in about an hour, and then Ryuk were basically anywhere between 2 and 29 hours. They were probably getting in within 2 hours and getting what they need in the reconnaissance phase, but basically the 29 hours is the exfiltration of the data. They were able to find the servers quickly, but that's how quick they're getting in and out with ransomware. Essentially, ransomware is a data breach, whether because they are gaining access. If they're stealing data, they could be creating accounts for their own persistence and access back in, either through VPNs. But essentially, the cyber criminals are gaining access into the networks. They're installing other malware. They're deleting backups. They're stealing data before everything gets encrypted, hold the data for ransom. There's public shaming going on. They're leaking data. You can go out on the dark web if you're familiar with doing that, and you can easily, very quickly find these different groups that have their data that they've exfiltrated and are leaking out for anybody to take. One of the big questions I always get asked when people come to us and go, should we pay the ransom if you get attacked? And it's a tough question. The FBI yesterday in front of Congress said, look, we can't make a law that says we're going to ban organizations from paying the ransom. Years and years ago, I remember another security colleague, Lisa Forte out of the UK, talked about the Italians back at the turn of the 19th century where kidnappings were going on. And when the government found out somebody's family member was kidnapped, they were freezing all of their assets and funds so they couldn't pay the ransom. After the first couple of families couldn't pay and unfortunately lost their loved ones, the mafia realized that they could no longer sustain that model. They couldn't keep kidnapping and owing for ransom because the government was stepping in and preventing people from paying. Now, for the longest time, we've said and made the recommendation, even the FBI, don't pay the ransom if you get hit. But now there's a lot more at stake. If they're exfiltrating your data, if that's intellectual property that's going out the door, customer information, what's that going to do to the revenue? What's going to do to the damage of the organization? We saw, and we'll probably hear several times today, Colonial, with when they were hit with ransomware. They, granted, it didn't hit their OT networks, it hit their cash machines, and so they had to go through and protect that. So they wanted to make sure, and so they locked down the OT network. But being hit with ransomware, the damage that it caused them, through one particular survey that I saw and read on ThreatPost, you can see a variety of different statistics here. Losing C-suite, how many people ended up paying, what was the remediation costs, and I'm going to go into that a little bit later on. But organizations, when you get hit, it makes it very difficult to keep the operation of the organization going. As we saw with Colonial, they were down for 5 days, which was a very short amount of time compared to how long it takes other organizations that have been hit. Average time is about 19 to 21 days of being fully down before they get back up to full operations. You're probably bringing up servers piecemeal from your recoveries, from your backups. It's not like something where you can flip a switch and get everything turned on right away. So when it comes to the ransomware, when it comes to the overhead costs to maintain production and everything else, is that inside the budget? Is that a part of the budget in the event that you get hit, that you can handle those costs? Granted, that's where cyber insurance comes in. And even then, they're going to come in and do a review. They're going to want to make sure that whether you're using MFA, you have a strong security awareness program, they're going to be coming in and doing an assessment as well. And ironically, cyber criminals have hit some of these insurance companies because they're looking for, okay, who are their customers? Now we'll go target their customers. So we know that they're going to at least pay us because they're going to get money from the insurance company to cover the costs. Also, because of the number of attacks, the insurance rates have quadrupled, gone up 400, 500% over the last year as well. So, all of this ransomware attacking all of these computers, I just wanted to share with everybody that I actually figured out Forrest Gump's password and was able to hack into his computer. Yeah, it was Forrest 1. We'll leave that one there. All right, so let's talk about prevention. So, talked about social engineering. It's kind of the number one way that data breaches are happening. But people are a critical layer within the fabric of your security program. Whether we consider them a weak asset, which I hope we don't, but they can be a strong asset because with the right education and training, it can help out. Now, granted, people are working from home. They're distressed and distracted even more so last year. Probably now again, as people may have to go back to work at home again, if they'd slowly come back into the office, but with everything with what's going on. But it certainly makes them more vulnerable than ever to these different cyber attacks. So when we look at providing security awareness, it's important that you've got that. And it's not something that it's done once a year or every couple months. This is something you want on a regular basis. Until you have that comfort level, your CIO, your CISO has that comfort level that people can spot these phishing emails and that you can reduce the risk of a phishing attack to your organization and increase your sustainability of keeping your operations going. So essentially, you're going through, you're doing an assessment, you're doing training, getting them educated, then continuing to phish them on a regular basis, review the results, focus on folks, continue to elevate those phishing assessments and making them harder to the level that you're seeing outside in the industry or outside that the cyber criminals are doing. Within KnowBe4, we get phished, or I get phished at least twice a week. And out of the 100 plus, 120 plus phishing attacks against me by KnowBe4 in our simulation, I have fallen for it once. It was a Zoom phishing email. I was actually waiting on someone to connect into a meeting. And I usually, when I have a meeting, I have everything shut down, the email. But my phone, which I have sitting over here, it popped up with an email alert notification that we all get on our phones. And I saw that customer waiting on your Zoom call. And I'm thinking, oh, they got on the wrong one. So I brought up my email right away, clicked on the link, see what meeting they were in, and lo and behold, realized that it was one of our phishing assessments. So even the security people are going to fall for them. And I know other social engineers and other security people have fallen for it. It's a matter of making sure that we're aware of that if we did fall for it, that we take the right actions and steps to be able to protect it. With regards to your organizations, there are tip sheets, social engineering red flags, rogue URLs, tip sheets that are available, cheesy plug from KnowBe4, but these have a lot of great information on there. If you're not sure where to kind of start that education or to get additional information, let me know, drop me an email and I can send them to you. Or you can Google them, KnowBe4, social engineering red flags, you'll find the PDF. So the phishing assessments, just to kind of give some weight to regards to the phishing assessments, when you do that baseline assessment, you're gonna have about 1 in 3 people are gonna end up clicking on that link. Once you do the training after about 90 days, it drops down to about 16%. And then your goal is to get less than 5%. So now you reduce your risk going from 1 in 3 people could be clicking a link to 1 in every 20. So it's a lot easier to monitor that, and your risk goes down significantly, reducing that data loss, potential ransomware attacks, get your increased productivity because you're not wiping machines, and hopefully work to get security top of mind. Essentially, when it comes to it, you want to plan like a marketer, test like an attacker, real world attack methods, have different campaigns. Don't be sending up the same phishing email. Do it frequently, not on a quarterly basis, monthly maybe, but if you can go every other week with it and assess and get that understanding and make sure your employees are aware of what to look for in phishing, then it's going to make things easier. Collaborate with marketing. If you can collaborate with your marketing folks, they're all about campaigns, and they can help along with your communications team work to get the word out within the organization. You want to look at a layered defense. You know, there's no one silver bullet. There's no one piece of technology. It's people, processes, and technology. It's going to take layers, defense in depth. Your OT networks separate from your IT networks, isolated, multiple levels of authentication, and try to avoid putting RDP on the internet. So I'm curious, does anybody, and this is the downside of doing this through a camera because I can't see anybody, but does anybody know why Superman doesn't fight cybercrime? He's afraid of cryptocurrency. And after the cryptocurrency story we saw yesterday, I don't blame him. All right, so let's talk about recovery. In the unfortunate event, it's kind of like on an airplane, in the unfortunate event that we have a water landing, it always cracks me up when they call it a water landing because to me it's a crash. But anyway, in the event that you do suffer a ransomware attack, I'm gonna provide some tips and things that you can do to figure out things that you may want to think about. If you've got an incident response team, do a tabletop exercise. Go through the process of being hit with ransomware. Figure out where the loopholes are. Figure out where there are gaps in that, so that way if you do get hit, you know who to contact, you know who you're going to call, whether that's legal, whether it's the FBI. Have that all prepped ahead of time. But if you do get hit with ransomware, your organization is massively hit with it, you want to be able to disconnect systems, whether that's through Wi-Fi or through hard connections. Figure out who the attacker is. Usually they're going to tell you, well, they always do. They leave a note because cyber criminals want to get paid. So you're going to have that nice note on your screen from one of those different groups. So once you've determined what the strain is, they've given you 72 hours to make payment. Now you have some decisions to make. And this is all part of that pre-planning process if you can go through and do that. But are you going to restore from a backup? Now with your backups, you got to want to make sure that those are readily available and that they're accurate. You want to decrypt you're going to try and decrypt the data files yourself. There are third-party groups out there. We just found out yesterday that the Kaseya attack from last month, they had their universal decryptor key put out on the dark web, and it had already been released a couple weeks ago, but now it's actually out there as well. You could do nothing, in which case lose the data, start all over again, or you can negotiate and pay the ransom. So when we talk about backups, you want to certainly go through, you want to make sure your backups, you check the integrity regularly, not a once a year thing, maybe once every 6 months. Recover one server as part of an exercise to go through to make sure you're going to be able to recover. Also, you want to have an understanding of how long is that going to take to recover. Is it going to be something that's going to take 24 hours, 48, 60, 72 hours? You need to have that understanding of how long that's going to take. You might even be able to, if you're using cloud providers, so if it's AWS or using Dropbox or Box or whatever, they do versioning. And so if your files are encrypted, well, then you can just recover from them quite a lot quicker than maybe from a tape backup or whatever. You can look at decrypting it yourself, and there are those third-party companies out there. No More Ransom is one of them. ID Ransomware is another one. Not 100% guarantee, but you can upload a sample file to them. They will let you know if they've got the decryption key, and if they do, they'll send it down to you, and you can start and go through decrypting your data. Ironically, the time to decrypt is almost as long. I've seen it where the decryption process is longer than it is recovering from a backup, which is what happened to Colonial. You can basically then your third option is deal or no deal. Whether you're going to negotiate with the cyber criminals, whether you've got to make that decision you're going to pay, because there is a certain time frame that you do have. Cyber criminals talk to each other, so depending on if you end up not paying or paying, they're going to go through and either look to try and hit you again with more ransomware after the fact. So there's that consideration. Negotiate or pay the ransom. They want to get paid. That's the whole reason these cyber criminals did it. They want to get paid. Usually, and you may have heard with the stories with ransomware and JBS, where they hit them with a set amount. If you get your legal team involved, or you have an external law firm that comes in that helps, they will negotiate with the cyber criminals. Some even have chat windows. When you go visit their Onion site, they have a chat window where you can communicate with them and negotiate. It's like, look, you're asking for 4 million. We don't have that available. We do have $1.5 million. We can give you that. They may come back and say it's 2. It's like being at a used car salesman's lot. But they want to get paid. They don't want to get ripped off. And so you're going to end up doing that through communicating through a Tor browser. You may need to have a Bitcoin wallet. And so getting a Bitcoin wallet takes several days. And then getting money into it takes a couple extra days as well, or can take a good 24 hours to get in there. And depending on how the rates are going, you may not have enough, and so forth. So that's all. Once you start the negotiations, sometimes as long as the communication's going and the expectations are set, the cyber criminals will work with you to get that payment sent to them outside of that 3-day timeline. They don't like to wait very long, but based on experience with what I've seen, discussions with other organizations that negotiate with them, that's a lot of what they're seeing as well. So finally, no matter what you end up doing, you need to, whatever machines you've had that have been infected by that ransomware, you want to wipe them. You want to basically wipe them clean of any malware. A lot of people go, yeah, but we've got our antivirus on here, the anti-malware, the EDX. It's saying it's fine. Sure, a lot of that's all dependent on what it knows, whether it's the deny lists, it knows what to deny, but there may be additional malware on the systems that aren't known by those systems. And so it's usually a good idea to stand up another server, restore the backup, or if you've decrypted data, copy it to another server, wipe the old one, and just because organizations have been known to have been hit more than once shortly after recovering from ransomware because they didn't fully recover. They didn't fully wipe their systems and reload. If you want more information, another shameless plug, but this is free. It's a free PDF. You can, again, Google Ransomware Hostage Rescue Manual and KnowBe4. We have a PDF that basically goes into more detail with what I was talking about here today. I could do a whole workshop on this Ransomware Hostage Rescue Manual, but with the shortened time today, I wanted to at least get to the highlights, give you the information that you needed so that you can go ahead and make decisions later on. So with ransomware, I've always been curious whether this is next. You know, early on, we heard a lot of stories of people at home getting hit with ransomware, their computers, but all the IoT devices that are out there, if those were suddenly hit with ransomware, your robot vacuum, your door alarm system, your cameras, we've even heard where cameras have been attacked by cyber criminals, gaining access to the camera and scaring the people or freaking out the baby because it's a baby monitor. But essentially, you know, where they were to go through and go, yep, we're going to lock out your camera now, you can't use it, you either pay us. But when it comes to some of this equipment, it's easily replaceable. You know, the robot vacuums are a few $100s. The cameras, heck, they're $25 or $30. So there may not be as much a lucrative model in it for them. But if they hit up enough people, you never know. So some final thoughts here. Best practices and tips. Train your users, get them educated, phishing awareness, increase the security culture within your organization. One of the things I know working working with Siemens, going to power plants and wind farms, there is a very, very strong health and safety culture. You go to any of those plants, you got to take a training class, you got to pass an assessment, and you get a little sticker for your hard hat. The same thing needs to apply when it comes to cybersecurity in all industries. There needs to be an elevated level of security culture, getting security on the top of people's minds, excuse me, getting security on the top of their mind so that they're aware of that, watching out for those phishing links, developing secure software, knowing not to put PLCs right on the internet or connecting them into the cloud. Backups, making sure you've got strong and verifiable backups that are available that you can restore from and that they're checked. Segmenting the network, basically going through, making sure that your network is, especially with OT environments, you've got that separated behind another firewall, MFA required to get into that environment, maybe even a jump host inside that environment that everybody connects to from outside first, and then that is the only thing that can talk to those OT systems. Handling privilege of least, the principle of least privilege, only allowing those authorized actual access. The whole company doesn't need access. Removing internet-facing RDP servers, put them behind a firewall, only allow a VPN connection to come through and connect to those is one example. And keep up with patches. I know in the OT space, energy, you know, it's not easy to get those patches up to date on those OT systems. I get it. So we have to mitigate the risk in another way. That's firewalls, restricting use, and so forth. But keeping up with patches, any of your internet-facing devices, those have to be always up to date and patched. When we look at the damage costs that ransomware is doing, you know, 2015, it was about 325 million. Now we're into the billions. We're expected to be well over 20 billion. I think it's already 25 billion this year. And I think this number is a little low. I think it's just going to get higher unless organizations can start recognizing the need to increase security culture, that sustainability, and everything within the organization. So security is not cheap. I think a lot of us already know that, but neither is ransomware. Basically, the average ransomware payout, this one's only showing about 220,000. It's going to depend on the organization. Cyber criminals will, once they gain access, or even ahead of time, they've gone through and checked to see what kind of money, what kind of profits an organization is going to have, and they're going to look for 10% of that. One set of cyber criminals hit a school district in South Florida that basically had a $400 million operating budget. So they turned around and said, we want $4 million. The school district barely had any money to begin with. That was their operating costs. Everything that came in went out. They were practically nonprofit. But they were hitting them up for $4 million because they found online that they had $400 million operating budget. But basically your sustainability, if you're hit with ransomware, whether that's through RDP sessions or phishing, you're going to have a loss of availability, loss of production. That's going to lead to loss of profits, and that all gets lumped in with those ransomware costs that you want to make sure that you're aware of what kind of impact that's going to be for your organization. So one last thing to leave you with is I'm really curious if anybody knows how the cyber criminals or hackers got away from the FBI. Yeah, they ransomware.